Your source for everything paranormal. ParaX. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the ParaX Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, Merry Meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, my guest tonight is Hollywood historian and owner of Dearly Departed Tours and FindADeath.com, Scott Michaels. And we're going to be talking about celebrity graves. Now, here in Los Angeles, they run the gambit from elaborate to humble, eccentric to classic. Some say amusing things, some say practically nothing, and others have a whole lot to say. Now, some bodies also don't always rest in peace. I mean, they pack up and they move from one location to another, like Judy Garland, for example, who not that long ago made the trek across country from New York to Hollywood forever. And we'll get into all that in just a minute. But I want to tell everybody that's listening live and not in the chat room with us tonight, I'm kind of doing an experiment. And some of the graves that we talk about during the show will be able to be seen in the chat room. I'm going to try and juggle them in as we're talking about them, which might be very funny or amusing. But if you're interested in seeing some really neat and interesting gravestones, you still have time to pop over to the ParaX chat room and join us at paraxradionetwork.com. And we've got interesting stories, we've got interesting pictures, and so many, in fact, that we'd better get started. So, Scott, hello.
Hi, Marla. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, you know, I have you on a lot because people like you. I like you too, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, I like you too, Marla.
Oh, here we go. It's not like we never talk or anything, or see each other for that matter. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong, but I think cemeteries in Hollywood and here in Los Angeles in general possibly get more tourists than mourners because we probably have more celebrities buried here than most other places. Am I on the right track, do you think?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, Hollywood has always been a mecca for star sighting. The star tours have been an institution here since the 1920s. So, people have always come here to gawk at their favorite celebrities. And it wasn't until probably maybe I think the late 70s or early 80s that celebrity graves became a real thing, where people started writing books about them. But I think that people realize now that cemeteries are a destination for tourism, and they can't get away from you there.
That's true. And here's the other thing, too. I was doing a lot of pondering this. What's interesting to me is that over the years, the city has changed. I mean, neighborhoods change, and what were perhaps like affluent neighborhoods at one time aren't now. And while people think that most stars are at Forest Lawn or Hollywood Forever or Hillside, whatever, that's not the case. For example, and I didn't know this, Betty Grable and Edgar Bergen are interred in Inglewood. Barbara Billingsley, Beaver Cleaver's mom, is in Santa Monica. And the Home of Peace on Whittier Boulevard, and a block down from Cavalry, you'll find all three Barrymores, John, Ethel, and Lionel, as well as Lou Costello. And people don't necessarily know to go there.
Yeah, those places are certainly off the beaten track, and like Home of Peace, the Warner Brothers are there, and two of the Three Stooges are there. So that's Stooge fans would go there. Calvary's pretty. It sounds insulting to say low rent, but Calvary, but I mean, Ramon Navarro. There's not a lot of people that say that, and I know there's more there than that. But Lou's there, right? Lou is at Calvary, I think. Yeah, there's not a huge draw for people like that, unless you're very specifically interested in those people, or you're a cemeterian, or the expression is a thanatologist or a taphophile, whichever.
Like yeah, and then there are the people that do the drawings, not drawings, but the
rubbings.
Rubbings, thank you.
Yeah,
Could do that. Yeah.
That's really hard to do. We tried doing that a few times. It's really not easy.
Really? Did you use charcoal or what?
Yeah, we did. But every time if there's a speck of dirt or something, it screws it all up and it rips, and you got to bring tape with you and all that. The result is great, but it's not it's something that people have to perfect. Definitely.
Well, that would be fun to try. I mean, practice makes perfect. Well, let's start talking about some really interesting grave sites. And the first one that comes to mind is at Hollywood Forever, and that's Johnny Ramone. And it is really an outstanding grave. Tell me about it, or tell us about it.
Yeah, that was, I believe that was somebody had made a statue for Johnny in real life, and upon his death, that was commissioned. So it's an identical to some trophy that he was presented at one point in time. But yeah, it has to be probably a good 15 feet tall, and it's a likeness of Johnny with his guitar. And then its marble base has different quotes from his friends Eddie Vedder and Lisa Marie Presley, just tributes to Johnny. But the funny thing about it is that he's not there. He's on his wife's shelf on her mantle. So there's this massive thing. It's wired. It has electricity. It has lights on it at nighttime. And they have every year a Johnny Ramone tribute night there, and they show some of Johnny's favorite movies and to raise money for cancer. But he's not there, and I just find that fascinating. But Hollywood doesn't say no to anybody or anything. No. So if you have the money, you could buy 10 plots and you can erect a statue probably, within reason, 20, 30 feet tall if you wanted to. And people do. So,
you do. And let me tell people in the chat room, there's pictures in there now. You can click on them and you won't go off the page, but it'll blow it up so you can see it better than the thumbnail that's in the chat room, just so you know. And Hollywood Forever has a couple of things. Like they have that Toto shrine, Toto the dog, the Wizard of Oz, and somebody else's, don't they? They're, what do they call them, cenotaphs?
Cenotaphs, yeah.
Cenotaphs, yeah. Jane Mansfield, there's one there too, right?
Yeah, as I understand it, the president of the fan club bought that for Jane as a tribute to Jane, but will be buried there himself whenever he dies. But yeah, it's it's funny that, isn't it? I mean, I guess it's nice to have a place to go. And Jane Mansfield probably would have loved a Hollywood funeral. It's sort of sad that she's in Pennsylvania, but again, it's nice that people remember them. And it's kind of cool because places like that attract other people like that, like Johnny Ramone. Chris Cornell was a big Johnny Ramone fan, and when he died in Detroit, he was cremated, and he's just a couple of steps from Johnny Ramone. So people do desire to be forever near their favorites.
And you were talking about cremation. That just popped in. I was going to bring this up, but it's interesting. A small fact that when George Harrison died, he was cremated at Hollywood Forever, but he didn't stay there.
Right. Yeah, you can. I mean, yeah, you could do that. I have several friends that have done that, where they, they'll take care of the service, but and also you could pick them up a couple of days later in a box, or and bring them back if you want to have them buried there. It's all very relaxed now. It's not as precious as it used to be back in the day. Where it's very normal. And it's before it used to be carry gloves and wear black and etc. But now it's just like stop by and pick up a bag with the cemetery's logo on it with your loved one inside it. It's funny.
I just thought that they did cremations like at mortuaries. I never, for some reason, never thought that, they would have brought
Well,
him there. I mean, he was in LA at the time.
Hollywood, they cremated Mama Cass at Hollywood Cemetery.
Oh,
In
did
fact,
they?
yeah, she was one of the last to be cremated there before the owner of the cemetery kind of let it go to hell. So they closed down the crematory, and it wasn't when it reopened up. When it reopened, the crematory did for cremations, because I believe Mama Cass was the last, and I believe George Harrison was the first when they reopened the cemetery to the crematorium. But the cemetery became a one-stop shop. So when you die, you go in there. You don't have to leave. They'll cremate you. They'll have your service there. They have a hearse, a British Rolls Royce that doesn't have a license plate on it because it can't operate outside the cemetery. And but it's just it's all a one-stop shop now. So it's an easy process.
Cool. I for some reason thought, wow, that was weird. We had a beetle and a mama.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably a lot more that I'm not thinking about or you're not thinking about at the moment. But I'm going to jump over to the next really standout gravesite, and it stands out because it's kind of sad. But when I saw it, I mean, I've not been there since it's been built there, but I looked at it on the web and I went, oh, shoo. That's kind of an amazing, creepy but poignant thing, and that's the grave of Anton Yelchin, who was the actor who portrayed Pavel Chekhov in 3 Star Trek movies and died in a freak accident. And you can tell everybody the rest about that while I go find the picture.
Well, yeah, Yelchin died. He was crushed in the driveway of his home when he was in his car, and he went to close the gate, and the car rolled backwards, and he was pinned against the gate. So I believe that's what happened. And he asphyxiated. He could not breathe. So he was cremated. Or no, I don't remember actually if it was cremation or not. But he was taken to Hollywood Cemetery, and he had a simple gravestone for a couple of years. And his mother and father, God love them, I mean, they are still there. One of them or the other is there every single day. Wow. And they're clearly, grieving terribly. I mean,
sure.
But they took it upon themselves to have a life-size Anton Yelchin statue placed on his grave. So it's there's several of those now around the cemetery of life-size statues. It's Carrie Bible, who's the official tour guide of the cemetery. She told me it started to look like a chess set.
Harry Potter, wizard chest.
Yeah, and they're really, I mean, I love cemeteries and I love grand monuments, and the more unusual, the better. But they're kind of packing them in there now, and there's like 3 benches for different people. You could buy these marble benches, but they're like all crammed on top of each other, and you can't really sit on one or the other because they're so close together. But that's what people wanted. So there's not a lot of regulation. But again, it allows for freedom of expression, because at Forest Lawn, what you get is a plaque, and that's the difference between cemetery and memorial park, because cemeteries are upright statues mostly, and memorial parks are all flat. So that's the difference. But Hollywood, there's some crazy monuments in there.
Yeah, and it used to scare me when I would go, and they would etch the pictures in the marble. Yeah. And that just kind of creeped me out. And then there was that Russian man who was very rich, and he's sitting on almost like a throne.
Uh-huh.
And that
that thing has to be 20 feet. Not the throne itself, right, but the slab or the marble piece of design has to be 20 by 20.
Yeah.
And he is in this chair, and it's just enough. It's huge, and it's questionable careers of some of the people there, and that's all I can really say.
Yeah, no, it's very true. But this one of Anton is so lifelike. I mean, they did a really good job of it, and I was kind of taken aback when I saw that, and I thought, well, yeah, that's really good. Now, the only other, there are many big shrines and everything, but I was looking at the one from Hillside Memorial Park with Al Jolson. Now, people might know him from the jazz singer or
Yeah, he spoke the first words in motion pictures ever.
yeah. And that was all well and good. I mean, I was, but when I saw what he's got like this, and I'm putting it in a minute, I'll stick it in the chat room. I've got 4 pictures. He's got this waterfall that salmon could swim upstream and get tired with. There's a huge life-size figure of him on his knee. He has this amazing sarcophagus, or whatever you call it, there. And he also has this thing that you look up, and there's Moses holding the 10 Commandments.
Oh, the mosaic, yeah. Yeah, that little
Yeah.
structure right there has to be 50 feet tall, maybe about 40 feet tall. And a sarcophagus of Jolson is in the center, and you look straight up, and there's a dome, a mosaic dome of the 10 Commandments. And it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah, but
I mean,
I believe, I don't know if it's certified, but it is, I think, the largest grave in Los Angeles. You can see it from the freeway.
Yeah, it's nicely done. I mean, you can't get quibble with that. I mean, but I didn't realize that it was that big, seriously.
Yeah.
And
No, it's funny you brought him up today because I literally was there this morning and took a bunch of pictures of it because it's just so gobsmacking when you're right in front of it. It's, geez, it's it is impressive, and I do as we started speaking today, I just thought, well, maybe he had a deal with the cemetery to up its sort of celebrity quotient to have himself in the grandest grave there and to appeal to others because there are a lot of stars in there.
yeah, well, I didn't know much about him, but in reading things, they said he had quite a large ego.
Yeah, honest to God, an hour ago, I was just talking to my friend Donna about that.
Okay, yeah.
He said that I am the greatest star of all time, and if anyone says he is, he's lying, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. and it's like, okay, that's rather amazing. I'm still trying to find the other 2. I got 2 of them up there. I know I'm not that good at this, but it's coming across in a different way than I expected it to. So,
did you know that Jolson, you probably did know this, he was married to Ruby Keeler, but
Yes.
he was Pugsley Adams' uncle.
no, now that I didn't know.
Yeah, he was. I believe Ruby Keeler was a Weatherwax or in the Weatherwax family somehow, and
Right.
Ken Weatherwax, who played Pugsley, was her nephew.
Wow, now see? It's funny, and people are connected to people, and you don't always realize it.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk while I'm trying to still find these other 2 pictures about Marion Davies' mausoleum at Hollywood Forever,
Mm-hmm.
because there's unlikely, and I don't know how many people will remember Arthur Lake as Dagwood Bumstead, but she, who is known as what, Randolph Hearst's
Mistress.
friend, mistress,
Yeah.
how did Dagwood end up in that particular place? It's just really weird.
Well, she and Hearst had an illegitimate child, and it was Van Cleve, I believe, was her name, and she married Arthur Lake, and so Arthur Lake is in her family mausoleum because he was married to her illegitimate daughter.
Okay, yeah, because when I saw it, I think I went straight to you and said, "What the heck is this? Why is he there?" And of course, having you as a good friend and walking around the cemetery with you, you learn all kinds of good stuff. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot to learn there. That's such a crazy place. Sometimes I'll just walk through it and just Google names as I come across them. I go, "Oh, that sounds like an interesting name," and it's fascinating what you come up with. It really is. There's a lot of really interesting, compelling, important people that you wouldn't know. It's Harold Rossin, who is right over by Dee Dee Ramone, was the cinematographer for The Wizard of Oz. I mean, the guy that composed the music for Dracula is over there, and it's such an odd, wonderful place.
It is, and they have people like the guy who invented the rear view mirror, and his name escapes me, but Elmo somebody, and it's funny because somebody I'm not putting the name down, but it's a funny name, and this guy did, something really interesting. But it was like a nerd would have to invent the rear view mirror, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk it, right? So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people there. The Little Rascals, some of the Little Rascals. Darla is there, and Alfalfa is there. And, I mean, for a small cemetery, they've got a whole lot of people.
Yeah, and they are not. I've said this story before, and I don't know if I've said it to you on a show previously. But when I moved back to L.A. from London back in 2002. I got a job at the cemetery, and I was there for about a month. I took their class on how to sell graves, and they actually literally had me knocking on people's doors to try to sell people graves.
Did Roth still own the place then?
No. This was
Okay.
This was
Right.
the Cassidy brothers.
Okay.
Probably a couple of years after they bought it. So, but anyway, I was shown around. And it was funny because they were showing me the celebrity graves. I'm like, oh, yeah, but you missed one over there. But at that point, a full grave by the lake was $28,000, which was, that's not cremation. That's a full casket burial by the lake, which is the most desirable property there. And when I was looking for a grave for Ken Weatherwax, Pugsley, I looked at the price list, and those are now $247,000.
Ouch.
So yeah. And because they can't make any more land because they're running out of space, because cemeteries only have a certain amount of space. There's a area that runs along Gower Street behind the mausoleum where Judy Garland is, and it was for maintenance, landscaping things. Well, they're going to be building. I believe it's going to be 30,000 new crypts from the ground up, just going straight up. So that's how they're going to generate more income. By making more mausoleums.
Wow. Well, I'm going to put in a couple of things and we'll talk about both of them, graves that made me smile. Because, they may be simple and they may be elaborate, but they're actually pretty cute. The first one is at Forest Lawn. It's, gotta find it, Penny Marshall, sorry. And she's best known for Laverne and Shirley. And her grave is pretty simple, but it's got the Laverne L attached to it. And I mean, and it's nobody has to explain it. You don't have to even give it a second thought. You know what that is, or most people do anyway, because it's still probably in reruns and things. But, how simple, a nice simple thing. And that's exactly who she was to a lot of people. They didn't maybe realize that she was a director and all these other things. But I thought that was really, really interesting. And then there was Don Knotts, and you can talk about Don Knotts. You'd like that one too.
Sure. Yeah. Don Knotts, when he was buried at Westwood Cemetery, and a very, very simple, name, dates, plaque, memorial stone. And then, so I guess this was in the works for a long time, but they finally unveiled a rather large bronze marker. And on this marker are 4 different versions of Don Knotts. There's Barney Fife. There's the Reluctant Astronaut. There is the Ghost of Mr. Chicken. And there's the guy from Three's Company. So there are 3 or 4 really relevant character or renderings of Don Knotts. And and I think that's really cool. And if you're a Don Knotts fan, because a lot of people, they shy away from stuff like that. They just, oh, there was a job, and I just love it when people embrace things like that and celebrate who they were, and also this is done for the people who come to visit. It's not done for Don. He's doing it because he wants people to smile and remember him. Yeah. So I think it's kind of neat.
Well, I just started laughing because I thought, that old saying, nothing is carved in stone, isn't exactly true anymore, because, yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that one. Now, the other one, again, we're talking about people who have put themselves with something that they're recognized for, would be Don Knotts. Don Adams, Agent 99, Get Smart. Now, he's got a tombstone with his hand talking into a shoe phone, which was the character of Maxwell Smart. Now, I don't know if you got to see it because I know we were talking earlier. I don't know if you saw it or not, but I don't think it particularly is very flattering to him. I don't think it really kind of looks like him.
Yeah, I'm confused by that because he was buried. His daughter's buried there. He died shortly after his daughter. He's
Hmm.
buried in the ground, but that plaque for him is like elevated on a post. So
Yes.
it's not even on his grave. It's like a tablet that's like a podium in front of his grave. It's above his grave, and yeah, it is. It does
Hmm.
show him on the shoe phone. And you're right. I don't think that's a terrific likeness. I do know when he died, he had wanted to be, or his family wanted him at veteran cemetery, but
Uh-huh.
they couldn't facilitate that quickly enough. So I guess he didn't really want to be at Hollywood permanently. I don't think it's any reflection on Hollywood Cemetery, but
No.
it's just he would have rather gone to a veteran cemetery. So I don't know if it was put there to be temporary. I don't know, but I'm with you. It's not a terrific likeness.
Yeah, I mean, if that was like my father or something, I would look at it and make them do it again.
Hmm.
Whoever did it, because clearly that wasn't the best likeness. But again, he'll be recognized by the shoe phone, and there's a lot of writing on it. So in that way, it's kind of a memorial to him, and that part is good. All right, I've got two more. We're going to go to break pretty soon, but I've got two more I want to put in the chat room of people who have things on their tombstones, again, that kind of remind people of who they were. Now, the first one, and I don't know much about this woman, maybe you do. I'm going to say it's right before my time, but maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But it's Mila Nurmi, and she was known as Vampira.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's got that on her tree. So what about, do you know about her? I mean, I
Well,
don't.
I helped pay for that actually. There
Well,
was a
okay. Hey, I got the right person to ask. Gee.
well, it wasn't, there was lots of us that donated for that, but a grave like hers, she died and she wasn't a wealthy lady. Vampira was the precursor to Elvira.
Right.
Vampira hosted a television program for about a year in the 50s. She kind of hung out with the odd sort of Googie's crowd, which was, James Dean and Eartha Kitt. They used to hang out next door to Schwab's and Martin Landau and et cetera. And Marlon Brando, of course, listened to Mila Nurmi, Vampira. She said she had affairs with everybody and she invented everything. But I was the first one to ever wear strap shoes or anyway. But when
Mm-hmm.
she passed away, she was living in a little bungalow at Hollywood and Western, and a woman not of means. And so they raised the money for this grave and for this stone, and had a big ceremony for her. And it was pretty interesting because they had a beautiful 50s hearse that they brought in for it, and they gave her a little Gothic urn for her cremains, and it was a nice little ceremony. It was appropriate. Lots of gothy people, and it was perfect. She was really embraced by that crowd of goths.
Yes. Well, and the second one, not a Gothic, and some people might not know him from the original Batman, but it was Frank Gorshin. He was an impressionist, and he played the Riddler in the original Batman TV show. And so he put the Riddler up on his tombstone, and it's really nicely done. It truly is. Um, so I just stuck that in there. Do you know anything about Frank Gorshin?
I tried to buy his underwear.
Why am I not surprised? I mean, shoot.
One of my weird Hollywood nights was. Have you ever seen a movie called Faster Pussycat Kill Kill?
No.
It's these Russ Meyer who was famous for making these really tough women, tough chicks with big bust lines, huge, and Super Vixens was his, and anyway, so Faster Pussycat Kill Kill is like a cult movie with these three really tough women, Tura Satana, and this other one named Haji. And Haji is friends with a neighbor of mine named Kitten, who was also in the Russ Meyer movies. And she said she was Frank Gorshin's mistress for the last part of his life. And she said she was selling his things. And I said, well, I don't know, personal items. I said, well, I'll buy his underwear. And so we had a meeting over there and at Kitten's house with Haji and another friend of mine. And she didn't have any underwear. She wanted to sell me these shoes. So they're really nice shoes. I was like, no, I don't want his shoes. I think his underwear would be fun to have in the museum. But so I ended up not getting anything of Frank Gorshin's. But I got to spend the evening with Haji and see his shoes. So that was fun.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. And when we come back, I think I've got Judy Garland lined up and a few others. So stay put.
Stirring the Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away. If you end up with webbed feet, remember, you've been warned. Explore the second edition of the Witch's Oracle deck through 45 innovative cards and enhanced guidebook that peers into the world of the witch. The deck's stunning artwork has a new look and includes 7 brand new inspirational cards. Each card now includes a suggested crystal or gemstone to enhance your reading, as well as a magical incantation that provides energy, reinforces the card's meaning, and helps the desired message to be sent out into the universe. The easy-to-navigate guide also has a new look and offers straightforward, gentle guidance that takes readers through both good times and bad. And now includes a chapter on crystal and gemstone divination by the amazing Nicholas Pearson. The Witch's Oracle. It is a perfect divination deck for witches as well as non-pagans and is designed to suit both seasoned readers and beginners alike. Find out more about the Witch's Oracle deck at www.marlabrooks.com, and you can purchase the deck from schifferbooks.com, amazon.com, or order a copy from your favorite bookseller.
You've no doubt heard of Tango and Cash, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Perhaps it takes 2 to tango. Well, now, on the first and third Thursdays of each month, there's a show called Tango and Friends at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Para X Radio Network with your host, Bruce Tango. And yes, there will be at least 2 to tango on each episode, sometimes even more. There's going to be lots of topics and lots of guests you'll all know and lots of surprises. Tango and Friends every first and third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. right here on the Para X Radio Network.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Okay, we are back, and I'm putting up, Scott told me, I mean, I knew that Judy Garland came here a while ago, not too long ago, but I didn't know that it's not just a tomb, per se, I mean, a burial thing, it's the Judy Garland Pavilion?
Yeah, that's I think it's a shrewd business move on their part. And my theory is, I mean, it's a fact that Judy was exhumed from her grave at Ferncliff in New York, which was really modest. She died, without a plan. So the grave was purchased at need. And so it was rather nondescript. And so her family, I believe, this is my take on it, made a deal with the cemetery. And I believe that the cemetery paid to have Judy moved here and gave her a beautiful grave, or actually a whole room, I should say a little private area for her and her family. And in the meantime, all the space around her, there's probably 200-300 little glass niches for cremations in the Judy Garland Pavilion for sale. So that's going for, a nice chunk of change. And people that are choosing to purchase their little cremation niches there get to decorate it any way they want. So you walk in there and it's just like tons of little ruby slippers in these niches and little just it's all these little tributes to Judy, and it's sweet that people want to spend forever with their idols.
That's very cool. That I didn't know. Well, how close is she to her ex co-star Mickey Rooney?
Not far enough. No, he's over by the lake, so she's at the opposite end of the cemetery. So there's probably a quarter mile between them. But I don't see now. There's people that I know that are Judy purists,
Yes.
and that would say that I really objected to her being moved because she didn't care for Los Angeles or Hollywood too much. So, but her family's all here. Liza lives here, and Joey
Right.
and Lorna. So
Yeah.
I guess they're the ones that wanted to make the arrangements. But it's sort of it's in a way it's kind of like when I don't know. It's a weird comparison, but when people sell their spouse's images after they die to sell vacuum cleaners on TV, like Gene Kelly and things like that, it's sort of
Yeah.
done without their permission. And that's the one thing that really stands out is that they weren't asked. But in Judy's case, she didn't make the arrangement, so maybe that's their logic.
Yeah, maybe her kids want to be buried with her, and they didn't want to schlep to New York or something. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't. I mean,
Well, that makes sense. I mean, they're all here. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff like that. All right, I'm going to jump over to for people who loved Bewitched. I'm going to jump over to David White because he has a rather unusual niche. Is that pronounce it right? Or niche over at Hollywood Forever. And his is also kind of a poignant thing because he's buried with his son. So why don't you give the story of that?
Well, yeah, actually, Alice Ghostly told me the story about him and his son. I guess his wife, David White's wife, died in childbirth with the son.
Wow.
And the son was killed in the Lockerbie bombing in the plane, the Pan Am plane over Lockerbie, Scotland. So I don't understand why so much time had passed. But ultimately, David White was inurned at the Hollywood Cemetery. And what makes his a real standout, amazing grave is that the bust, his head that was a prop on the show, is in his niche. So not only do you see his name, but you see his face. And for Bewitched fans, they'd recognize that sort of gold bust or bronze bust of him from the show. So it's kind of cool that they did that. And you know what? I bought my grave, and I'm 2 spaces below him.
I know. I was just going to say, you're going to be neighbors.
Yeah, but he moved in after me. I bought mine, and then he moved in. So I don't know why.
He was the one that's in the neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah. I've got a lot of friends that bought on that wall because I turned them on to it.
It's a nice wall. It really is. I've always kind of liked it. So while we're on the subject of Bewitched, there's a story about Abner Kravitz, George Tobias, that you know, that maybe some people don't, and might be interesting. I don't have his grave, but it's a great story, so go ahead and tell it.
Well, it's another one of those moving around after you died things and not having a say in it, except his was more immediate because his hearse was basically hijacked. Somebody, George Tobias was in the back of a hearse in a casket, and whomever it was that was driving the hearse stopped and left the keys and the engine running and got out of the car for whatever reason, and somebody stole it and took off with his body in the back of it. So, and that happened really recently here too. There was a big car chase on the 10 freeway, probably about 6 months ago, with a body in the back. Somebody had carjacked. So, no rest for the dead sometimes.
No, they get to go wherever they want and even where they don't want, which is kind of interesting. Also, you were telling me a story earlier that I didn't know about. Geez, I thought after all these years I would have picked your brain clean, but apparently it's a lot larger, or mine's really too small. So you were talking about Carol Burnett's grandmother, who I know was buried there, and who is she buried by and why?
Well, Mae White was her grandmother's name, and that was she's the one that when Carol Burnett would tug her ear at the end of the show, which became iconic. That was her little silent hello to her grandmother, and her grandmother. They grew up on Wilcox and Yucca, right on the little, and she used to work at the Warner Pacific Theater, which is right over on Hollywood Boulevard. So when the grandmother died, she was a huge fan of Nelson Eddy's. So they chose a grave right by Nelson Eddy, not far, probably about 10 yards away. It was probably the cheap seats back then, and that's where she is. And it's funny because Nelson Eddy used to. It's a modest little marker.
Yes,
and but people, there's still really rabid Nelson Eddy fans that will go out there and tend to his grave a lot. I met some, and they were pulling the weeds from Nelson Eddy's grave and throwing them on his wife's grave because they didn't like her very much. But anyway, Nelson Eddy, since there's nobody really stopping any of the building anymore, Nelson's little marker was there, and it was easy to find. Well, now there is this probably another one of those 20 by 20 marble things, literally about 6 inches above Nelson's marker in the ground. So it's completely overshadowed by this thing.
There's a little bit of a hill there or something, just a tiny hill where he is, because I was there one time and not watching where I was going, and it was before the cemetery got kind of fixed up better than it had been, and I actually tripped over Nelson Eddy and went flying and then apologized for having tripped over him. Felt like that, and that was just really weird. And where's Carol? Well, do you know if Carol Burnett has chosen to be like where her grandmother is?
No, I don't actually. I don't know. I know that she's probably going to be at Westwood because that's where her daughter is, Carrie.
Oh, okay.
So, and she's in a private garden there.
That makes sense. Hollywood is such a weird place. You said she worked at the movie theater on Wilcox. Well, Carol Burnett also went to Hollywood High. And I think I've told this story before, but we had an assembly when I was there, and they brought her in as a guest because she was an alum. And I was in the 10th grade, and so Hollywood High has a balcony in their auditorium because it's so big. And, of course, 10th graders were up way in the back there with, whatever. She came on and she was talking to everybody and talking about her school life and everything. And then somebody screamed out, "Please do the Tarzan yell." Mm-hmm. And she stepped away from the mic and she stepped in the middle of the stage and she put her hand up to her head or to her mouth. She did that Tarzan yell so loud that me back in the cheap seats, it hurt our ears back there. I mean, she was a really good sport for doing it. But, this is the way LA is. What can I tell you?
That is her, unfortunately, cross to bear. Because she's never. We went to do one of those Q&A things with her about a year ago. Troy and I did, and without fail, they asked her to do the Tarzan yell. So it's got to be exhausting, but she's got to do it. She's got to pay the piper, It
keeps her lungs healthy, I think. Now, you mentioned about her daughter Carrie, and that brings up another Carrie, whose tomb. She was a daughter, and whose tomb is rather strangely elaborate to me. I know I was telling you about this the other day. I don't know what to make of it. This is Carrie Fisher, of course, that I'm talking about, and she's buried with her mom, Debbie Reynolds, at Forest Lawn. And this is a humongously large thing with, I guess it's supposed to be a mother and daughter statue. What do you think about it?
I don't know. I don't know if Debbie made her own arrangements before she died. I mean, she was elderly, so I thought that would have been on the radar at some point. But the statue, or the where they are right now, is in a fairly new area of Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, and it's on par with her monument is on par with Liberace and Betty Davis. They all have those amazing statues, and I don't know if it's just a coincidence that there was a statue there of like mother and daughter or something. Sometimes when people die, especially in that close, they died one day after the other. There's the emotions run high, and the family goes, we got to spend a lot of money on this because it becomes that way. That grave probably. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say it's close to $1 million. I wouldn't. It would. It's pretty prime real estate, and it's big. It certainly is. And she's buried in a little. Her urn looks like a Prozac bottle, a Prozac
compared.
tablet.
Yeah.
And but Debbie's full body burial. So, but there's a lot of space for those two people.
It's just, I don't know, I guess it's the statue part of it that bothers me. And maybe, like I told you, maybe that's a famous statue that I just don't know anything about.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's all sorts of that kind of business at Forest Lawn, famous copies of, masterpieces. So it's quite
hmm
possible.
Yeah, well, anything is possible in LA for sure. In fact, I surprised somebody the other day when they were doing KTLA was doing all the rioting and stuff, and this was somebody that wasn't in LA at all, and said, "Yo, that guy's got a good voice or something up in the helicopter." I said, "Well, his name is Larry Welk. Welk. Does that ring a bell?" And she goes, "Well, the only Welk I know is Lawrence Welk." And I said, "That's his son. He owns an aero company where he rents out helicopters to TV stations, and he works for Channel 5 as their reporter up in the air. So Lawrence Welk's son is a helicopter news guy."
Huh, I didn't know that.
Something you didn't know. Hey, I'm really happy you said that then, because there was very little that you don't know. All right. So another picture real quick. You were talking to me earlier about Mary Kay Bergman. So you sent me the picture. Tell me the story.
Well, Mary Kay Bergman was a voice actress, and she was responsible for the female voices on South Park. So all the characters that she portrayed on South Park are actually etched into her gravestone, which I think is so sweet, her tombstone. So, so unfortunately she died, rather young. She took her own life, and it was a shock. So, because when it was actually that year that South Park was nominated for the best song in their movie when the uncut movie came out, and Blame Canada that was the only song that they could use because the music was really good in it. And music was fine, orchestrated well, and great lyrics, et cetera, except it was all profane. And Blame Canada was the only song they could pick out of that movie that they could, somewhere honor it somehow. And Mary Kay Bergman was dead by that time, and Robin Williams had to sing the song on the Academy Awards. So it's sad, very interesting and very sad. But all of her South Park characters are there. She worked under a different name for years because she was afraid that being associated with that show might harm her career as a voice actress. So it wasn't until a couple of years into the run of South Park that she decided to go back to her real name.
That's interesting. Somebody just asked about if Liberace had a piano on his. I'm downloading it now real quick to get it. But in the meantime, because we might run out of time playing like this, will you tell people about your podcast and Dearly Departed Tours and the closure of the museum? And that'll give me a chance to get whatever. And as you're talking, I'll put Liberace up there.
Okay. Well, Dearly Departed Tours, we chose, Troy and I decided to close the museum it was a really difficult decision to make, but we decided to close the museum and store everything. And that was we had our farewell in late February, and we were out by the first week in March. And bizarrely, it was the very next day that this, stay at home order came about. So we really just, it was the worst decision we ever had to make, but yet it ended up being the best decision. So all everything in the museum is stored away for a while until further notice. And also the tours had to stop too because of COVID. So the buses are just kind of, waiting to get started up again, and we're waiting for the go ahead to start doing that. So we fully intend to be back and operational. We're just waiting for the rules and regulations we need to do that. So fingers crossed that won't be too long. So in the meantime, though, I've been working on a lot of content that is available online. Mike Dorsey and I started doing the Dearly Departed podcast, which has got it's got some decent attention, and we focus on weird stories, the movie Sunset Boulevard or TV shows like the cast of Gilligan's Island, and we just talk about the people and the unusual stories about the people, and also including their deaths, because that is what we do. So there's that, and then also I've been working online on YouTube, putting a lot of videos up on YouTube, and so it's called Dearly Departed Online on YouTube, and so every once in a while I'll upload something. Yesterday was a real fun one because I posted. Do you remember the lava lady from when you lived around here. She was probably dressed all in black. She lived around Melrose and La Brea,
Yeah,
and she
yeah,
wore
yeah.
those like 13-inch platform black shoes and
Uh-huh.
burlap. Her hair was put up in a like it had to be 2 feet or a foot and a half above her. Her hair was
Yeah.
molded, and she wore all black, and you see her walking around.
Hmm.
And so I just did a thing about her. We called her the Lava Lady because her house was covered in lava rock,
Ah,
and yeah. So I like to take weird stories and stuff you didn't know, maybe a lot of people didn't know, and throw them up online, as it were. So yeah, and I did another one a couple of weeks ago. Dick Dale, the guitarist,
yeah.
the famous beach guitarist. He's at Hollywood Cemetery. That was a surprise too. He was just
I didn't
put
know
the,
that.
yeah,
Wow.
just I don't know when, but I just
I'm
stumbled on him one day, so it's kind of cool.
I'm totally out of the loop. Um, Someone was asking, and people can find all this information about you. Where is your one-stop shop? Where they go?
Oh,
Website?
dearlydepartedtours.com.
Okay, okay. Just so you know that they can find you there. But somebody in chat asked about the Marx Brothers because he knew that I like Groucho. Are there any stories about them or where they buried? Now, I can answer one part of that really quickly, and it's kind of ironic because Groucho was buried at Eden
Hmm.
Memorial Cemetery. Well, his wife was Eden, the mean one, right? Is that not kind of strange?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the one that was, I think I'm right. That
Oh
was
wait,
blamed for elder abuse with him and everything. Her name was Eden.
I
But
don't
maybe not.
know.
Maybe it's some. But it just struck me when I saw that. I thought, whoa, But
Yeah,
he's at Eden. Do you know where any of the other Marx Brothers
yeah.
are?
Well, Groucho's his ashes were stolen one time, and literally someone opened up that little niche where his ashes are, his cremains, and stole them. And it was I think it was a former employee because they ended up putting his ashes in the driveway of Mount Sinai Jewish Cemetery and just
Mm-hmm.
leaving them there. So Groucho did another one of those unauthorized little travels after he died. Harpo, as I understand it, is scattered in a sand trap at a Palm Springs golf course. Gummo is at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, Glendale, really close to Larry Fine. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure where Chico is. I don't know where Chico is, but
Some gambling parlor, no doubt.
yeah, no
He's
doubt.
probably buried in Vegas.
Or
Yeah.
maybe Reno or something. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. All right. So now I'm putting in there Frank Sinatra and Rodney Dangerfield because they have interesting things on
Little
it.
epitaphs, yeah.
Epitaphs, and Peter Falk does too. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like when people have their taglines. Jackie Gleason says "And away we go," and Dean
I
Martin.
know, and they fit. This is the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And what was Peter Falk's? You told me earlier. I forgot.
I'm not here. I'm home with Shara, his
Sure.
wife.
Oh, that was. You know what that was? That's a
Mm.
great story because that was a total jab at Peter Falk's daughter. Because Peter
Oh,
Falk's daughter and the wife Sheena, I forget her name, but she was. Yeah, the daughter was trying to sue Peter Falk for the college education she should have had, and so she
oh,
wanted the financial compensation. It was ugly, and something happened at the cemetery at the burial, and finally the wife just said "screw you" and put a nasty message on that grave for the daughter specifically, which I think is fantastic. Talk
wow.
about getting the last word in.
I know. Well, when I looked at Rodney Dangerfield at first, I thought, well, he's going to write, I get no respect. But he actually wrote, There Goes the Neighborhood, which was,
It's funny that cemetery, and you would think Westwood would be, a little bit different, but Westwood
Mhm.
is really receptive to that. Billy Wilder, I'm a writer, but nobody's perfect.
Yeah,
Uh,
that I
uh,
loved. I loved that one. Yeah.
who's the other one? Merv Griffin. I will not be right back after these messages. Uh, so it's cool that they allow people to do that. And then there's very modest ones like George C. Scott. His is unmarked and just a couple of doors down. So
Right.
it's interesting what people choose, and I know. I like when they do little, messages here and there.
I do too. Now, what do you think about, do you think it was on purpose, or is there a story behind this? Speaking of Westwood, Hugh Hefner is interred right next to Marilyn Monroe now. Is there any particular reason for that you know of?
Well, now he bought that grave in the 80s for $15,000. Now, easy, $1 million to be next to Marilyn, easy. But she was the first centerfold in Playboy magazine.
Okay, that may be all right. So there was a method to his madness then.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, he always said he wanted to be. Marilyn was his. I don't know. I can't say creation because she was famous all that time when he bought those nudes that she took for $50 one time. But yeah, it did Marilyn no harm, and it certainly put him on the map. So he owed it to her, and yeah.
Okay, and there are two quick things that people were buried. Or their stones aren't what they seem to be. And I told you about this one this morning, that Gene Kelly at Forest Lawn isn't really Gene Kelly. The signature on the tomb looked like a handwritten thing, and they said he's not buried at Forest Lawn. He was cremated, and his wife has his ashes.
Yeah.
But
we call them fakes. There's a fake Alfred Hitchcock at Hollywood Cemetery.
I was just going to ask you that. But is that on purpose? Because the Gene Kelly one is actually Gene Shelley. The way it's written, people see it as Kelly, but it's a real tomb for a real person. The guy's name is Gene Shelley, and his handwriting wasn't that great.
Yeah, I don't think it was done directly to mislead people.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
But was Alfred Hitchcock's for real?
No, Alfred Hitchcock is another one that was cremated and I think he was dumped in the ocean. But yeah, there's a lot. It's funny. You walk through cemeteries all the time and go, "There's that's a fake so and so," and that happens quite a lot. There are fake Judy Garlands and fakes. They're not fakes. They're real people. They just happen to have those names.
Well, yeah. Well, there's probably fake Judy Garlands impersonators all over the place. So in that respect.
And they're in the Judy Garland Pavilion, or they will be.
Well, yeah, if you can afford it.
Yeah, no kidding.
I know, that's going to be really crazy. But, some people think that it would be very good celebrity for them to be buried there. And, that's kind of nice in its own way.
I like it. I think it's a neat place. I like it when celebrities are in clusters. Of course, there are, like we talked a little, Sinatra, he's out in Palm Springs. And there's, I think he's with Sonny Bono and maybe Busby Berkeley. Not a lot of big names in that cemetery, but it's beautiful. I guess I'm sure that he decided in his own life that that's what he wanted, because I think he's buried near one of his good buddies. I'm not so, but yeah, it's interesting.
All right, so time is up. It flies too fast. I keep saying we need 2 hours with you, but we got a lot in, and I got a little crazy posting pictures and trying to talk and think at the same time, but I think it was all right. So I managed.
Oh, what? One more thing I wanted to mention. We brought up Liberace for just a second.
Yeah.
And Liberace, his signature was the elaborate candelabra, and his signature is on his crypt. If you notice, when you look at a picture on the bottom right, there's an empty spot. But if you look very close, there's his mother, his brother, etc. But down the bottom right of the front of his grave, it looks like a name was there and it's been removed, and it has been removed. He had a brother named Rudy, and Rudy Liberace was going to be there, but some kind of family squabble happened. But his name was there, his birth date was there for years and years and years, and finally, maybe about 10 years ago, the family removed Rudy's name. So there was some sort of squabble within the family. So if Rudy had intended to be with Lee and the mother and George, but the family said no. So it's interesting.
Interesting for sure. All right, so it's dearlydepartedtourist.com if you want to find Scott. And I usually, my closing is pretty normal. But I just decided to take one more tombstone and use it for the closing. So I will say thank you, Scott, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And in addition to my usual blessed be and merry meet again, in the immortal words of Mel Blanc, that's all, folks. Good night.
Circle be open. the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. Merry meet again. Merry meet again.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited.